to know more of our wholeness begins to realign health, begins to realign lives. When we believe that we're broken and need to be fixed, that's not accessible. And so, nothing to fix, allowing coherence to arise, because the human system knows what that means. And there are great tools and strategies to improve it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Game Changer Podcast. My name is Michelle Dutro. I'm your host, and I am joined today by somebody that I really just met a few minutes ago, and yet is my soul sister. You are going to see the amount of similarities. If you have followed me for any point in time, you are going to think, wow, I just scripted this whole conversation to only talk about the things that I want to talk about. But it turns out these are all the things that she talks about. So we are lockstep across the board. Here we go. My guest today is Dr. Mickra Hamilton. We have so many similarities. Anyway, here we go. She is a retired Air Force colonel. You know, I'm prior Air Force colonel and former human performance expert who spent decades optimizing performance at the highest levels. After navigating her own health challenges, her work expanded beyond traditional models into what she now calls the coherence effect, a system-based approach that integrates epigenetics, the nervous system, environment, and consciousness. What I appreciate about her perspective is that instead of treating isolated symptoms and focusing on the whole in order to truly thrive. And I think that you'll hear throughout this conversation just how much we overlap from nervous system to environment to human potential, because I swear to you, I talk about all of these things all the time. Dr. Mickra Hamilton, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michelle. You know, I also feel the kinship. What I love about your work is how you help people see the truth of their patterns. What I've become fascinated with is what happens in the body when those patterns are believed.
Yes, yes.
So there's definitely synergy.
Oh, there sure is. And we're going to dive into it. Before we do, because that was such a super highlight of you, how did you decide to join the military, you know, as not only a female, but a female back in the day, not the most common choice to be made? And then the field of your choosing, how did that come about? And then get me to the point of retiring and what you chose to do for your next chapter.
Okay. Well, the military choice was very, very easy for me. You know, I was influenced by the Terminator, Linda Hamilton, Wonder Woman, you know, and like I watched the Amazons. I watched strong women really move very powerfully through the world. And that colored, of course, my own identity build as I developed. And part of it also was financial, because in our degree, you have to do a 9-month fellowship. It's kind of like you do your first year of residency, and the pay was half of what the military paid. So because I loved being strong and performance, and because I got paid double, because there was better equipment in the Air Force medical system, that was an easy thing for me. Discipline, I absolutely knew. And then what was your second question?
So so you were in for how many years?
30.
30 years, everybody. That trumps my 4 by a landslide. So you were in for 30 years. Did you always know I'm just going to go to 30 years, or did something happen to say, now's my time?
Well, I knew I was going to 20 for sure. Okay. What happened at 20 was I was enjoying my time in the military so much, and the reserves at that time, they started matching people in their civilian career into the military, and mine happened to be human performance. And so they invited me, you know, those last years as a human performance, they say expert, but right, a human performance person. And I was able to do the advanced things that we were doing in our corporation in the military setting, and it really changed lives. I mean, people who were stressed and burned out from deployments would come, and I would work with their nervous system. And they get back from deployment and they say, Colonel, I can't thank you enough. I wasn't stressed, and I came home in a much better place for my family than I had before. So, you know, it's just like it was heartfelt things, massive changes.
So, human performance, but what is your degree actually in?
My degree is I have a doctorate in audiology, which is
Audiology.
yeah, vestibular, hearing, balance, cochlear implants, yeah, monitoring nerves in the OR.
Okay,
And
so
so,
how did we get from one to the other? Because most people wouldn't think an audiologist is now expert, however you want to name it. I'm going to call you an
right.
expert in human performance. How did we go from there to there? What happened on that journey?
Well, when I went into the military, I went to the biggest teaching hospital in San Antonio, Wilford Hall, and learned absolutely everything and more than an audiologist could do because neurology taught me the intraoperative monitoring. What happens is as you progress, you are tapped on for other things. So I did 6 years in the clinic, and then recruiting said, "Hey, would you like to be a flight commander?" And you know, supervise recruiters bringing in docs and line officers. And I'm like, well, I love the military. And so I'd be a great person to chat about it. So I did 4 years in recruiting. Um, it was so successful. We went from the bottom to the top in 1 year, not because of me, but right, everybody involved. And that led to like more leadership billets, education and training, Air Force Research Lab. Um, from 2008 on, though, I'd been building this corporation because I'd pulled out of mainstream medicine and with my partner, Dan, my beloved. And it just kept getting more and more precise, almost as if we were led to like, what is the next intervention that's really going to help the whole human system
Yeah.
um, recognize itself at whole. So that was the transition. And also, of course, I'm Irish descent. And so my mom named me that because this really incredible microphone came out the year I was born. And I think the Irish tend to name their, without even knowing it, right, to name their careers. So being named after a microphone and being an audiologist is just an interesting um, kind of synchronicity, I think.
Yes, I would agree. Okay, so now you have just mentioned that you have a corporation that was started simultaneous of, kind of running parallel. You were doing the things in your corporation that we're going to talk about next, also still in the Air Force, and started to merge what you were learning and bringing that in, which was on this human performance side. Back then, and we'll see if it has evolved over time, what were the biggest game changers, if you will, things that you were helping people with, especially when you said just come back from deployment, that helped them? Uh, that transition is a big one, right? It's a when we're out and all we have to do is our job. That's a very different thing than now we're back with our family and we have to integrate into some kind of normalcy of life, let alone whether it's coming back from deployment or leaving the military altogether. And that transition is very hard for a lot of people. So, what was the work that you would say really made the biggest difference back then for people in transition, whatever they were transitioning to and from?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I know I love this because you do this work, but um, what I discovered that surprised me more than anything was the impact of the breath on the entire system. Um, I was doing some research in a sound chamber, and I called HeartMath and I spoke to Roland McCready. And he talked to me about the study and helped guide it. And then he referred me to Dr. Peter Litchfield, who is a psychologist. His life is dedicated to breath work um, and the emotional components of breathing. way more than that. But when I met with him, I was blown away as he started describing end-tidal CO2, or the carbon dioxide that's in the small alveolar sacs at the end of the exhale, and the impact that had on the system. I just knew I had found something that all PTSD could benefit from.
Yep.
And so I trained with him for years. I did a master's of science. I mean, it, it was, how can I understand the breath as the vertical integrator of all things in the human system? And so I began measuring their biomarkers of HRV, um, temperature, skin conductance, respiration. But I added the CO2 monitoring to it. And what I found across the board was fast breath, high in the chest, where they're breathing vertically. So tension, chemoreceptors screaming, alarm, 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 and CO2 that was hypocapnic, so not enough CO2 to deliver the oxygen across the system. And them being military, I would take their 18 breaths per minute, ask them to breathe in 5 seconds, out 5 seconds. So take them down to 6 breaths per minute, and their bodies cooperated immediately.
Yep.
The CO2 climbed, the temperature climbed, the skin conductance reduced. I mean, it was this beautiful just picture of what happens when you take a stressed system that's running on overdrive, slow everything down in coherent expression. And they said, I am so calm, I feel like I'm going to fall asleep. Right. Of course, it needs to adjust.
Yeah.
Um, and then we were able to develop training programs where they could take the 18 breaths per minute to 15 breaths per minute to 12 breaths per minute, and the system knows what right is when it gets in that coherent design. Um, and so it feels like the letting go of control and the allowing or inviting this natural process to occur where I'm not pulling my breath in or pushing it out, which we can do and many do, right? So,
Yes. Yes. And the thing that I love about this as well, and we both are, our background is biofeedback of many different types, but in biofeedback, having the ability to see a screen and see the internal function of your body, to see how it responds to your thoughts, to your breath, even if you don't have that, like you're saying, everybody feels the shift. You see it, right? The shoulders drop, the tension in the jaw drops. And it's certainly why we've heard our whole lives, every one of us, hey, take 3 breaths before you respond. And there's a reason for that. So, like I said, we have everything in common. And the thing that I also love about breath work, and there's only 1.5 million videos on YouTube that you could go watch for any particular condition. There's different types of breath work for different things, but just slowing your breathing down alone, it's free. You can do it on your own. It doesn't require an office visit, and it is life-changing, no doubt about it. So here you are, you're in the military, we're, peak performance expert. 30 years comes by. Now it's transition time to what you're doing. It's not really a change, but you're doing it now full time in your business. But what was that transition like for you? Because it still is a turning of the page of 30 years. So you worked with, I'm sure, plenty of people in that space, and now it's your turn. What was that for you?
well, it was interesting because I truly, when I got my 6-month notice that I was, nearing 30, I was surprised because I loved serving in the military. Being a medic, you're helping people, and that always felt like a beautiful thing if I can assist them to be calmer and more coherent, then they're going to come home to their families. The the decision was I was on the generals list for in the reserves. You have to it's called a qualified list. You have to qualify, and I'd been on it for many, many years. And the question was, is this something that's possible, of course, and is it something that I desire? Um, in sitting with it in contemplation, I realized it was time to go, to fully dedicate myself to the corporation and, health for humanity, which is what we were working towards. And the transition was not as I expected. The great thing was that I thrive in my corporation. We create, the team is incredible. The clients are, their lives change. And we've had them for 18 years, many of them. And that's a long time, to be connected in relationship with people who feel like your family.
Yeah.
And so that part of it was incredible. Just after I retired, well, it was like, you put your hat on every time you go outside. You still live under kind of authority, constructs. And the hierarchy was interesting because I had not felt that. And yet I knew it was there.
Right.
So my beloved and I said, well, okay, there's got to be quite a bit of deconditioning of a childhood home that was military, and then going into the military.
Yeah.
What does my life look like from all of that conditioning? And we went to Costa Rica. It was his birthday, and we tried MDMA. Nothing happened. And that part was interesting. There was almost a question of what's wrong that doesn't work. Of course, then that was followed by, well, there's clearly a reason, and we'll figure it out. So I entered medically facilitated treatment for a lot of military conditioning, a lot of life conditioning.
What
And
in the world led you to go to Costa Rica? Let's stop there because I'm sure people are going, hold on, this is a career life colonel in the Air Force. Now all of a sudden we have just moved to Costa Rica and MDMA. What did I miss there? I must have just, went to the bathroom and missed a segment in there. Okay, so what? Because what may be logical for one person is not for another. So why? What was the intention? What was the goal? What is it that pulled you there that you were hoping you would gain from it? That obviously we know the outcome. It didn't work. We're going to keep going down that road. But let's stop here on this one. What pulled you there to begin with?
Well, we had been doing retreats there for many years, probably 10, wellness retreats. And we're in love, of course, with the nature and how refreshing it is to be away from EMF and lots of chaos, and
Yeah.
24/7 movement. So we were on a 6-week trip. We didn't actually move there, but we went for 6 weeks. And I was actually a little scared, just going to share, because I had such deep conditioning around that's bad for you and you might end up losing your mind.
Yeah.
And so my husband's a physician, and he did the research, and he said, no, he said, there's something about years and years of using MDMA legally in couples counseling with no side effects, no negative side effects. And so I said, okay, I'll work with this and see. Um, I didn't realize at the time that my heart couldn't feel, that my body couldn't feel, that I had intellectualized love
Hmm.
and tied it to more of a description, of what love looks like as opposed to what does love feel like in the body. We discovered I didn't know how to feel, which is right. It's talk about identity shifts, right? To realize that I didn't know how to do that.
Where was
And
your
so
partner at with this? Did he, was he sitting back saying, okay, now we're finally going to get somewhere? Was he surprised? Did he say, oh, yeah, yeah, I know this has been an intellectual process for you and maybe not, an internal, heartfelt feeling one? I'm curious as to where he was on this
mm,
journey with you. How did that land with him?
well, so he was exactly like me until his first dose of MDMA.
Wow. Okay.
And in that
Mhm.
session, his heart opened completely. And he knew what reverent devotion meant. He
Hmm.
he got on his knees and washed my feet because he wanted to demonstrate how he felt about me. And we were both very strong performers. And I'm looking at him going, oh, I don't know who that is. Like, so I lost my identity of him
Right.
as he lost his own.
Yeah.
Um, and I said to him, later that day, I said, I don't love you the way you love me. I can tell, I can see it, and I know I can't feel that. And it was disturbing because we were so connected. And he said, I'll wait. He said,
Mhm.
because you also will know this. And we
Mhm.
spent the next 4 years
Wow.
working to, um, you never arrive, right? But to be in a place of coherence where love is all I am.
Yes.
So,
That is, wow, that is cool. Okay, all right, but at that point, you didn't feel anything. He did. He had obviously a very big, shift and opening and transformation. You did not. That also had to be, a bit unnerving for you, I
mm,
would imagine, right? So then what next? So you got home, and I'm sure I would imagine, high achiever, high performer, we don't just end there. We don't just quit. Okay, now it's okay, now what can I try? Or now what can I do? Or, this, I'm just not going to settle for this is how it is. So, what happened next in that pursuit of you?
well, of course, the perfectionist
Hmm.
performer would go and design a plan
Yep.
to bring that online. And I'll just share one thing. Part of the plan was he would show me something that he knew brought me joy. And it was baby goats in pajamas. You know how they jump around and
Oh,
they're
I sure
just
do.
so
Yep.
cute.
You and I are very connected. Yep.
And he said, okay, what do you feel when you see this? I said, oh, I gave an auditory sound to represent the feeling.
Feeling. Hmm.
And so he said, well, let's go a little deeper. What do you feel inside your body? And so I tuned in to that process in real time, and it felt like champagne bubbles or fizzy bubbles moving up through the system. So there was more of a felt sense. And so we worked with what does felt sense actually mean
Hmm.
and how to cultivate that. Um, it was so much fun because I felt like I truly didn't know how to feel. And so I could start at the beginning, and learn how to feel at that age. I mean, it was brilliant.
And, my background is also in yoga nidra, guided meditation, which is all about, I mean, the whole point is really bringing you back into you. And we do a lot of things to survive. We separate from ourselves. Oftentimes, child abuse or things that have happened is that those events and that part of us goes in Pandora's box so that it didn't happen to me because that's not me. And
Right.
that's just put away. And anytime there's part of us that's locked away, then as you well know, the whole of us really can't be there. There's only part of us that can be there because part of us is elsewhere. So what you're talking about is one of the more common things, certainly around PTSD that I see, but just commonplace is that whether intentional or not, how easy it is without us realizing that we don't feel. And again, sometimes a safety mechanism, and sometimes it just feels a lot easier not to. That I can logic, rationalize, explain things away, and I don't have to drop into my body to say, where do I feel that? Well, what does that matter? I've already answered the question, how that feels. The goats make me happy. That should be enough for you. So, so all of this, tell me I know because I read your book, and I'm going to encourage everybody else to do the same when we get to at the end of this conversation here. But out of everything you tried, and I know it was a myriad of things, what had the biggest transformation or the most profound impact, and why do you think that was?
I'm going to answer that in sort of a two-pronged answer. I'm going to start with nature because nature, being in nature, reconnected me to the knowing that I am interconnected with all of it. And so, whether it was hiking or rafting, whitewater rafting, or climbing, um, just sitting under a tree, in stillness, it feels like that was what first created a known sense of belonging. And as I shared, we were doing facilitated psychedelic work for several years. That was the second most important thing. It's really interesting to move through the fear that arises as we contemplate using substance to have a new perspective. And we always approached it as sacred medicine because it's from the earth, and even the synthesized, it's just interesting how one approaches it. So for us, it was ritual. The intention was to it wasn't to look for the places that I had hidden from myself. It was more to create a new lens of perception so that with the coherent strategies that we were using, the system knew more and more truth and needed less and less, intervention, to where it got to the point where my system would show me the things and I was able to translate them into sense making. I wouldn't have been able to do that without the facilitators being very whole themselves. So,
And that is for anybody who is contemplating this or is currently looking into it. Intention setting, all of this is such imperative. It's not negotiable for being in a safe environment, and that you are with people that are well versed in this, hopefully shamans. Not that they got their training on a weekend online somewhere, but legitimately generational. This is who they are and the space that they hold, because it is very transformational. And there is, most of the time, lots that comes up that has to be interpreted in order to be integrated in the right way and effectively, so that you're not, because here we go again about, TDY or ending your military career. This is no different. You're going back to your life after Costa Rica or Peru or wherever it is that you may go, and life is going to look different. Life is going to feel different, and everybody in it is going to feel a bit different. And how we navigate that is important. And having someone that you can continue to work with, I think, is also a very important thing. That again, this isn't just a weekend getaway. This is, life transforming, which you are a fabulous example of. So I'm curious, in your business, you had this well before you were in the military, and then continued to this day with with what happened with you, with your transformation, with truly feeling and dropping into the wholeness of you for the first time in what had been your whole life up to that point. How did that allow you to show up differently for people? What changed for you in that regard?
the uh, when the identities were dropping away and the awareness now is limitless nature or true essence, or however, anybody describes their own experience, because I can only speak to mine. I was aware of the things that I couldn't see before. And so how am I going to get something from this? Right.
Mhm.
It was in unawareness. I had no idea it was there. Well, then with the new awareness, there's a humbling of the entire system, as it realizes the unawareness. It didn't know it of it consciously, right? And yet there's still work to be done to integrate that so that it doesn't stay um, in shame, or right, any of the felt sense of the conditioning. It feels for me like I'm present. My mind isn't moving away. It's not figuring out what to say like it used
Yeah.
to, because it knew all the answers, you know.
Yeah.
Um, it's simply open, spacious, and f- for what I experience directly is that creates a coherent field. And so the relationship of the two, whether it's at the grocery store or it's, with your beloved, or a dear friend, the conversation becomes emergent,
Mhm.
and there are no thoughts that want to move a topic in a certain way, right? There's no directing of conversation. It's simply arising and unfolding as this is today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. A and, I knew that I was so looking forward to chatting with you, and I think on a certain level, I knew this would happen as well. I always have like, hey, here are the things that I want to cover, but I just knew that, where our conversation flows is where it's going to flow. There's a certain amount of people that I chat with that becomes very difficult because, they have an agenda and these are the things they're going to talk about. And it's a very interesting thing when you are with somebody that, as hard as you try to bring them in to being present, that there's such a level of unawareness that they just never are. There's nothing to even compare it to because they're just never really here. And I think we see that, sadly, with everybody carrying around a cell phone 24/7, is that no matter who you're with, here's a phone, and you're always on it. So even when you're talking, you're texting or you're typing on a computer, but there's there's no part of you that's ever fully present. It used to just be, I'm having a conversation but thinking about, oh my gosh, I forgot to do laundry. But now it's, I'm talking to you and typing and talking to someone else simultaneously, and that is, courtesy of neuroplasticity, does change the wiring of the brain to just always be multitasking all the time and never fully be anywhere. And, of the things in society that kind of worry me or that I really pay attention to, it's people that, if I were to say, well, I mean, I own a retreat center, 20 acres on a mountaintop. And so it's really not an option. You do have to have time sitting next to a tree. It is one of the most uncomfortable things for someone to do. To
It
sit
is.
without a phone, without a distraction, without something to direct their mind. It is fascinating how, of the things that they'll say was the hardest or the most overwhelming, it's that. Sitting in
And
silence. Can't do it.
and there's even research that shows that they will shock themselves before they will sit 15 minutes in silence.
It's something. It's
Yeah,
something. But you, listener, I know we're not talking to you. We're just talking to other folks. All right. So, back on this, I do want to cover this. I do want people to get your book. You talk about, and here's where I said we have such massive overlap, the 6 domains. So, I want to briefly chat about these and why these specifically mattered enough to you to have a book around them and your practice and your life and everything that you stand for. So, the 6 domains that you work with and find imperative for healing, as do I: physical, psychological, social, environmental, spiritual, and energetic. So, just super briefly in a sentence or two, and then I'm going to do a deep dive on a couple of them. So, physical, tell everybody how you mean that.
yeah. Think of all things matter: the physical body, the genetics, the epigenetics, the hormones, the metabolism, the fascia, the bones, like the physical structure as it relates to the environment around it.
Okay, so there's one that we're building around. Psychological should be self explanatory, but tell us how you mean that, how you look at psychological awareness and impact.
All things mind. So thoughts, beliefs, conditioning, feelings, like everything that is sort of the unseen domain, um, and how that is presenting to create the physicality.
That's a big one. It's
Yeah.
fascinating. I work with people a lot on their values. What is in conflict, what we value, and then we value these things, but we are leading our life a whole different way over here. Or we say that we value things, yet we're spending our time over here doing this other thing. And it's also fascinating to me when I say, tell me your top 3 values that are the guiding principles of your life. And then, it's kind of deer in the headlights. Like, then, then we're in a big conversation on that one. Okay, let's chat about social. How do you mean that?
Yeah, social is, or I use the term relational dynamics. It's, do we feel we belong? Do we feel we're part of a community, part of a greater whole, part of the earth, not separate from the earth? Um, Loneliness is one of the biggest things
Yep,
for decline and departure of the human system.
that's right. Yeah, and I think that most people I talk about it a lot on different podcasts here about the blue zones, and it is the only thing out of all 5 in the world that they all have in common is that sense of purpose and sense of community. It's not the environment. They're all very different ecosystems around the world. It's not diet. It's not religion, but it really is this sense of purpose and this sense of community that is the kind of common denominator of them of not just longevity but happy and healthy. It does no good to live to 100 hooked to tubes. That should be no one's goal.
Yeah.
Okay, environmental. How do you mean that?
Environmental means everything. Everything that we breathe in, everything that we take in any way. Um, the foods we eat, um, the chemicals in the air, the microplastics, even for me, when I say environmental, it truly includes everything because the environment assists us to know who we are and also creates the body the way it is too. And so, um, to separate, and this is why it's domains with breath as the vertical integrator, because even having domains, we automatically, like put it into more siloed spaces. Um, yeah, environmental construction from the perspective of, do I love where I work because I see the sun and the windows are open and I have plants, biophilia in my office. I can get outside and actually be in nature. So, of course, environment in that way is a big part of it as well.
Agreed. I remember chatting with somebody once, and I said, "Well, we've been out for so long. You probably need to get home." And it was this heavy sigh of dread, and I was like, "Oh, what is that?" "Oh, the house is just always such a mess. I hate going there." And that's your home. And to separate that and that feeling from your overall health and wellness is silly. They're not separated. And so all of these things are absolutely imperative. Okay, these last 2 are the 2 we're going to do a little bit more of a dive on. Spiritual. How do you mean that?
Spiritual is, I also say, um, purpose and meaning. Because while spiritual for some might mean they follow a particular religion or a certain discipline, it means something different to every single person alive. And so, um, the meaning and purpose allows it to go to a place where we can move from our self-centric needs to other we-centric places. And in that way, we benefit personally and the entire ecosystem benefits as well.
Yes. Yes. And, on that, there are many indigenous tribes that fully believe that all disease and sickness in the body is just representing a spiritual crisis, that there is something happening with us. Again, let's go back to your definition of purpose, that somewhere along the way, what happened with purpose and meaning, and to just solely treat the body as though you have a problem with your kidneys and not and not look at everything is you may fix the kidneys and then it's the liver and then it's the pancreas and then we've got a thyroid problem and the chasing never ends. Okay, last here but not least, energetic.
Energetic. This is my current deep dive fascination.
Great.
And it's because when we speak of energetic, we're talking about mitochondria in the body in one lane, and we're talking about the human biofield, which is the energy body of the human. It's pretty well established that everything is made of energy, and so um, I love looking at the ancient wisdom and the modern knowledge, especially what's been happening in the last 6 months and will rapidly increase in the next year or two. There is so much evidence um, that the energy body is essential to optimize so that the physical body can. And so um, in the book I worked to bridge those two places because there's a group that says none of that is true, real, or valid. There's a group that says no medicine is true. What we're all, at least what I see us all looking toward, is the and both.
Mhm.
When you look at the science and you look at the ancient wisdom, they knew what we're only beginning to measure.
Right. That's
And it's
exactly right.
exciting what
Yeah.
we're finding and how frequency energy medicine is changing the entire system. And we still don't know exactly how that happens. And yet we have, such beautiful evidence that it does.
Yes. I was a firefighter, and when I left the fire department, which was obviously rooted in Western medicine, right? What is wrong? Let's take the list down of your family history, as though epigenetics don't even have any bearing. But back then, it really wasn't, 25, 26 years ago, that really wasn't the conversation. It does matter because it's how you're raised, and so it is your programming, and so probably there is a lot to be said for how your family ate is how you eat, your family beliefs are your beliefs, and so that matters. That was not exactly what our intake was meant for, but that is much more relevant, quite honestly. But my transition from there to being a biofeedback specialist was all energy medicine. And that was my start. And it was like you have had many big switches that flip. The devices behind me are some of the ones that I use here, and they're all frequency based. And it is a very nice thing to see these two worlds that were very separate. And if you believe in one, you cannot even remotely believe that another exists. And thankfully, there is so much with the advancement of technology that we have the ability to see, let alone let's just understand acupuncture has been around for 4,000 years. So, I don't, have they been wrong for that long? I'm pretty sure that we would have abandoned that as a concept if it was wrong for even 1,000 years, let alone 4,000. So, all of these things coming together to say, the end of separateness across the board would be a great place to get to is like you just said, it's not either or. How can we say, and hey, let's do blood work and let's look at your biofield. What is happening everywhere? So I love all of this. If people want to get your book, if people want to know more about you and where they can personally come and work with you, if that's a possibility, please tell everybody where they can find you.
Okay, well, the book is on Amazon. Somehow it got into the new age category. I'm not sure how that happened. Um, and that's okay too, right? um, Dr. Mike, drmicrahamilton.com is my website that shares more information and how to work with me for corporations, for individuals, and apeironcenter.com, APEIRON center.com is the center itself where clients come from all over the world. And
Perfect. And this is in Austin, correct?
In Austin, yes.
Okay, beautiful. So if you find yourself in Austin, Texas, you know where you need to stop by for sure. Okay, great. Is there anything, I mean, holy cow, I knew this was going to happen, but is there anything that is on your heart that you're thinking, gosh, I just wish I could have conveyed this or left folks with this thought or this idea that we maybe didn't, or you want to say something more on a topic? Please, if that's out there, what is it that you would like to leave us with as kind of closing thoughts for people that would like to actually really be better, not just Ozempic look better, but actually physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally be better? What are, after all these decades, what are your greatest words of wisdom, if you will, for the listeners?
Yeah, thank you. For me, the knowing that our system is already and always whole. It can't be any other way. Even considering that as a possibility, putting a question mark in the field, could that be true, opens a field of curiosity. Simply the invitation to know more of our wholeness begins to realign health, begins to realign lives. When we believe that we're broken and need to be fixed, that's not accessible. And so, nothing to fix, allowing coherence to arise because the human system knows what that means. And there are great tools and strategies to improve it.
Yes. Beautiful. Okay, I end and you may answer this the same way, I don't know, but I end the show the same way for everybody. So this will end no differently here. Um, Dr. Mickra Hamilton, what is one thing that you absolutely believe to be true?
I absolutely believe that I am limitless.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That comes through, yeah, leaps and bounds in the words that you say, in how you show up, in your energy. And I am going to have on show notes for everybody. So if you're out on a hike listening to us, you can just come back and pop and see all of the links to find Dr. Hamilton and connect with her and follow and continue to learn more. And it's a continuing journey for all of us. We're never done. We're never, okay, I made it. Well, I mean, there's one last day. I suppose you made it at that point. But until then, it's a journey and forever learning and growing. And I appreciate everybody who has tuned in for this time together. And hopefully that felt a little bit like that, a little more learning and growing and exploring um, and a space where, you feel safe enough to inquire about some things maybe in a little different way and give yourself a little more grace. And I too have said from the beginning of time, you're not broken. There's nothing to be fixed here. We may have some things in the way of the body's natural healing and the tools that we have to figure out what that is. But the body is designed to heal itself, and oftentimes we are our own worst enemy, just getting in our way every time. So, being able to figure that out, and what are the things that we're doing, and what are the things that we need to switch up. And I would say, my closing thought, reflecting on this conversation, is as difficult and as painful as it may be, go find a tree and sit by it. Go get in nature and just be with yourself. And in time, you will come to learn, as I know we know, it is the most cherished time that there is. So thank you, my dear, for joining me. I loved
Thank you.
this conversation. It was like chatting with an old friend that I just met. So I loved that. And I appreciate you and the work that you continue to do. And thank you for your service. It means a great deal to me. And for everybody listening, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Game Changer Podcast.